Welcome to The Bottom Line with Erick, a podcast that explores the intersection of storytelling, communication, and influence. In each episode, we sit down with leaders, creatives, and communicators who are shaping how stories are told. People who understand how to move an audience, spark a conversation, and leave a lasting impression. Because at the heart of great marketing, powerful leadership, and meaningful change is a story worth telling.
Welcome back to The Bottom Line. Today's guest is a longtime friend and someone that I have had the privilege of working directly with for more than 6 years at the beginning of my career, Alex Thomas. Now, Alex has a deep agency background and has led communications for major brands, including Samsung, Pepsi, and now Canopy Growth. As the head of communications at Canopy Growth, he advises executive teams and guides communications through high-stakes moments. This conversation is about communicating when the stakes are high and when the story keeps shifting and leadership needs clarity. So without any further ado, let's jump into my conversation with Alex. All right, Alex, thank you very much for joining me. Really happy to have this conversation with you. I think, you are someone, probably one of my most longstanding kind of friends in the communications field. We've known each other for well over a decade, sort of came up together working at Apex, but also at Praxis. So thank you for taking the time to chat. Maybe to start off, just tell me a little bit about your background in comms, how you got into it, and sort of where you've been since.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for having me on, Eric. Appreciate the offer. I think what you're doing here is really great. Just trying to talk more about the strategic, the tactical side of comms and everything that goes into it, and really just shine a spotlight on the profession and the discipline. So it's really cool. I always say I'm a comms guy by trade. I went to school for communications at Carleton. Did a couple of internships at some PR agencies, which is where you and I met at Apex. And shortly after I graduated, just went right into the communications field. I spent the first 10 years of my career working at a couple of different agencies in Toronto. And then I guess it's probably almost 5 years ago now, I moved into more of the sort of corporate in-house side of communications. I was at Samsung for 3.5, 4 years, and then now I'm at Canopy Growth, looking after corporate communications, external comms, really brand comms, product comms, things of that nature. So yeah, I'm a comms guy through and through. I love what we do, what we have the capacity to do, and finding organizations that really value communications and see it as a contributor is a really cool space to be in, especially now in 2025 with just, how consumers, stakeholders look at brands, how they interact with brands. It's a unique sort of discipline or sector to work in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love your story and your family legacy, I guess, if you want to call it a legacy. But when you talk about, being kind of a communications guy from the beginning, maybe just share a little bit about kind of your dad and the way that that his career maybe impacted your decision to get into communications. I know for myself, when I was in high school and even in university, I really wasn't aware of what a career in communications or even marketing necessarily looked like. Mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit about sort of your story and how that maybe impacted your early career decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I look back on that as definitely I'm going to say like a push in the right direction because of where I've landed. But yeah, my dad was he was an ad guy back in the 70s and 80s. He grew up working in all of the big Canadian, North American advertising agencies and sort of the heyday of the advertising world. And over the course of his career, was an advertising executive, a marketing executive, working in-house at a couple of different corporations and things like that. So I just kind of grew up around it. Like when my dad would talk about work, it was advertising, it was marketing, it was TV commercials and cool things like that. So I think I just generally had exposure to the world of consumer communications, consumerism, that sort of stuff. To be honest, though, when I was going to school, I also thought I was going to get into advertising. Thought it was really cool, super creative, making spots. Digital media was that's what everybody was talking about. Like people were still writing on each other's Facebook walls and stuff like that. I wanted to make ads. And to be honest, I didn't really know what comms and PR was at the time. Kind of fell into the internship by chance. Definitely got an introduction to some folks on the Apex side, but very quickly on working at Apex, I was like, oh, this is way different. This is super unique. I didn't know a ton at the start, but learned very quickly. Cut my teeth working on some really interesting brands, different kinds of variety, and then got a lot of exposure to events, social media, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I think this is a space where I really want to play. Underlying all of that, I think the idea of like storytelling is something that continues to resonate with me this day. How brands tell their stories, not necessarily advertise, functions, features, benefits. It was really about, shaping and telling a story that needs to be heard on behalf of a company or brand. So it's kind of how I got into it, and I'm really happy with where I landed. I love what I do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And shout out to Howard, your dad, Howie. He's a beauty. He's a great guy. So glad that we were able to kind of chat about his career a little bit as well. So you kind of led into it a little bit, but starting out working at Apex and then later on at Praxis and Edelman on the agency side. Talk a little bit about sort of, why you think that early agency experience was really pivotal for you and what you learned in those early agency days. Obviously, you're working in-house now, and you hear a lot about the contrast between agency versus corporate or in-house. You've done both now, so maybe just shed a bit of light on what that experience has been like for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I say honestly to anybody that's thinking about a potential career in communications that everybody should go work at an agency. Yes, for the pace and the variety, but also just the pure breadth and scope of work that you get an opportunity to touch on. Pretty much every agency that I've worked at and that still exists today, they're working on such a vast variety of types of communications. You can do corporate, you can do sports marketing, you can do healthcare, and it's all within the same shop. So you get exposure to all different kinds of things. And, you may go into an agency saying, I only want to do financial services communications, but somebody asks you to go work on something in healthcare or food and beverage. And if you were working in-house, you'd probably have to switch jobs completely and go work at another company. So just the exposure to the breadth and the variety of what an agency offers, that would be the big one for me. I think when I look back on my time at agency too, it's executionally too, and tactically the exposure that you get. It's events, it's influencer marketing, it's writing and corporate communications. You could do financial communications. So sometimes in-house you may take a role that's very specific. I'm just looking after internal comms and employee engagement, and yes, you will get exposure to other facets of communications, but sometimes the work could be a bit tighter in its scope. So again, agencies kind of give you that really wide aperture on what communications is and what it can be. And if you're going to learn all about it, it's just going to give you more tools in your arsenal as you go forward, wherever you choose to work.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I would echo that 100%. I've always said in the 10 years or so that I spent in agency, I mean, you literally have 100 careers over that span, right? Because you're doing something different every day, working with new brands. And I think you're also surrounded by people that live and breathe communications, which is very different from what the world looks like when you're working in-house, right? In sort of a corporate role. You've been doing that now as well for a number of years, and obviously you've been with Canopy, I think, for just over a year now. Talk to me a little bit about kind of the juxtaposition of, having that agency background and then moving in-house, and what you found were sort of the differences and what you really maybe liked or disliked about being on that side of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the biggest sort of aha for me, or just part of the journey, is what I would say is like in-house, you're a lot closer to the business aspect of communications. You know, executives and business unit leaders, they're sitting around, they're setting strategy, they're rolling out plans and sort of long-term programming for the company for years to come, and communications is often pretty central to that. So you're in the mix a lot earlier with communications, providing insight into risks and opportunities and other proposals for how something might land, or stakeholders that need to be considered as part of whatever it may be. That's not to say that on the agency side, you don't get exposed to strategy. There's, some of the most strategic and smartest communicators I've ever worked with are at agencies. But, my experience on the agency side was, not to say completely removed, but often just a little bit more closer on the executional side of things. So, the plans have already been baked, the strategy's kind of been set, and then we're saying, here's the 3 or 4 priorities for the year. Can you help us build out a PR plan or an influencer plan or a social plan, whatever that may be. So they're highly complementary. But for me, where I'm at right now, being a little bit closer to the business, helping drive some of the strategic work, guiding the executive decision making, just being a little bit closer to the risks, to the issues, and the goals and objectives is something that really resonates with me professionally.
Yeah, for sure. No, and I would agree again. Like I think just the way in which you're able to really kind of get to know the brand that you're working with, right? Whereas on the agency side, you might have 5 or 6 clients at once. Again, it's like you've got the breadth, but you don't really have the opportunity at times to get the sort of the depth into that one specific brand, get to know the business, get to know the, like you said, the long-term strategic plans that are in place. So I think that's a super keen observation for sure. When I think back when we first met, it was like the advent of social media. Those were sort of early days in communications. Now we look through to sort of, where we are now with, I guess you can't even call it the advent of AI anymore, because it seems to really just have exploded and expanded so much over the last 6 to 12 months. But talk to me, on your opinion about how you think the role of communications has really changed over the last, 10 years or so, and maybe where you see it going as we're dealing with, the next chapter of communications, the next chapter of sort of, what business looks like in general with this new advent of AI.
Yeah, I think my honest perspective is that comms at all organizations has more or less always had a seat at the table. Most executives understand where comms can add value. Comms is not always an afterthought. Sometimes we have to deal with that, but where things have kind of transpired in the last 5, 10, 15 years is that comms has become even more like a strategic lever for organizations and brands to take advantage of. I think you touched on it. Social media was probably a major pivot point there, where, for the first time in very, very long, like you were able to have a conversation with your customer, and not just a one-way dialogue or an ad or, calling a 1-800 number. And that, I think, transformed how brands and corporations needed to think about themselves and how they're perceived, and realize that sort of everything they do, you're kind of living in that glass house where, if you're not going to behave as well as you should, or, you're up to some nefarious activity, customers, stakeholders are going to see that, and you're going to get dragged through the mud for it. It's going to impact stock price, trust, reputation, all these sorts of things. And so, today's brands, I think, really take advantage of that opportunity to talk more directly with customers. And so comms, again, just becomes super critical in that sort of that corporate dynamic of how we all interact. I think AI, broadly speaking, has been super positive. That's like a personal and a professional opinion. The
Yeah.
risks and the downsides of the pitfalls, it's not lost on me. You read that stuff in the news every day about AI mishaps or, sensitive data being like leaked and put in models that gets, out to where it shouldn't be. But I think, generally for me, for comms, even at Canopy and even at Samsung too, like AI has become a major productivity booster. I think that's one of the huge benefits of large language models. Like you can get help with, distilling tons of information down and, increasing output and, you know, sharpening really long speeches and all of these kinds of things. But at the same time, I think AI still needs a human touch. I certainly haven't cracked how to make Chat GPT sound exactly like an executive. It can maybe give you the structure for something, but my team were in there as the safeguards of the tone of the brand voice of the leadership guidance, whatever that may be. So we still got to be in there day to day, really driving comms forward and with AI as a productivity tool. So I think anybody moving forward, like you've got to understand how all the tools work. You've got to know how to use them. You've got to you also got to understand the concerns or the risks with using them. You don't want to be the reason the company gets in trouble or anything like that. But yeah, I don't see AI going anywhere. I think it's going to continue to enhance comms. Whether it all just becomes about language and text, I don't know. We'll see what the next phase is. But for right now, I would guess that a lot of communicators are using AI right now in their day-to-day work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, I don't know about Canopy specifically, but when I think about my day-to-day role at Meridian, it's really just changed everything that we do, how we do it. It's 10x productivity. It's made
Hmm.
everyone so much more efficient. Processes that might have taken you, hours, literally take you seconds. And so, to your point, I think there's, a lot of education that needs to go on, and people need
Hmm.
to understand the repercussions and the right way to use it. But the power that it has as a tool is just, I don't think something that we've really experienced, certainly in communications, but in business in general. So it'll be interesting to see what the next, again, it's only really been 6, 8 months. So it'll be interesting
Hmm.
to see what the next 6, 8 months and then beyond look like. I don't think anybody can really, distill what that exactly will be, but it's exciting times for sure.
Hmm.
Um, so another question I wanted to ask you, like obviously my background working in post-secondary education. I'm sure you've heard and read about some of the changes that have been made to Ontario's post-secondary institutions right now, specifically some of the corp comms and PR programs that were really the I guess the sort of breeding ground for young communicators in the industry. Those programs have shuttered, and I think I'd be interested to get your perspective on what impact that has on a young communications professional coming into the industry, because you never took one of those post-secondary specific degrees in PR. You obviously studied communications at university, but then you found your way into the profession kind of through a different non-typical route, I guess.
Hmm.
um, I would be curious to get your perspective on, what that experience was like. If you ever felt like maybe there was a bit of a gap in that, experience because you didn't have that tactical PR training, and maybe what advice you could give to young communicators or people aspiring to get into communications who now are looking for, which path they should go down.
Hmm. Yeah, this is a good one. You are right. I did not do a postgrad in comms. I had done two different internships while I was at university, and I had an honest conversation with Linda Andros, who's still the managing director at Apex. Around the time I was graduating, I just said, should I go back to school? Everybody I know gets a post grad certificate in PR, or do you think, internships kind of have supported some of my growth and development in this space. And she was a great leader, great mentor. She was like, I think you could certainly parlay that into more of a full-time coordinator specialist type of role. And that's what I did. I feel very, fortunate in that respect, and based on the relationships that I built and the work that I put in. But at the same time, I see tremendous value in post-grad comms. I think probably more so in the last 5 or 10 years. I don't know too many like undergrad programs where you can get like a BA in comms. There are programs out there for sure in Canada and the US. I've seen them. You can get a full like master's now in comms and stuff. So I think the theory and the learning and the education is still super critical. Even just thinking back to the last question around like how social changed the game for corporations and how AI is further impacting, like everyone still needs to go and learn about those things. You're gonna learn the theories, you're gonna do some practical writing, all of that sort of stuff. So I suppose I'm saying like, you know, we all have to keep educating ourselves, whether that's through, your own learning. Chat GPT is actually really great for learning in that regard. I remember there was, so total side anecdote here. I had asked a question. Well, you've got your MBA, right, Eric? I had asked Chat GPT like a couple of months ago. I was like, based on like leading programs, like MBA programs across North America, like what does a standard kind of 2-year program look like? Could you make recommendations on books, YouTube videos, free LinkedIn and Coursera courses? Like there's still learning opportunity out there. I think we should all be lifelong students. Like I'm still reading a ton about comms, trying to learn, follow thought leaders in the space. Like you're always going to have to keep on learning. I realize I'm not totally answering the question right now. I think, part and parcel of that, putting yourself out there, networking is still critically important. There's tons of really great PR associations and networks out there. Try to go for coffee with different people. Like I've also been extremely fortunate in my career to work with some fantastic managers, coaches, mentors, things like that. So I'm always very quick to say like, yes, you want to go for a coffee, you want to talk, you want an introduction, you're thinking about this switch, that change. Like we've all got to help each other out for sure. But at the same time, it's not lost on me that the communications industry it's highly competitive. I know pretty much every sector is like that for sure. A lot of people competing for not a lot of jobs, but we've all got to help each other out. And so I think the networking piece there is critical. Yeah.
Yeah. I think those are great observations. And I think the one thing that really resonates with me is like this notion of having a mindset that is really focused on like continual learning, right? Whether that's through formal courses, formal programs, or just your own professional development. And I think now more than ever, there's so many resources out there that are so easily accessible. You can, if you have the motivation, really, immerse yourself in that atmosphere of ongoing learning as you build your career, right? Whether you've got 6 months of experience or 6 years of experience, you always want to be kind of tapped into that mindset. So I think that's a great kind of tidbit to live with people that are maybe, early on in their careers, thinking about starting a career in communications. It's really, having the motivation to do that and sticking with it. And then, like you said, just getting out there and hitting the pavement, being proactive, meeting people and kind of setting yourself out from the pack, right? Because it's such a competitive field. The onus is on you to really make those connections and set yourself up for success in the beginning.
For sure. Yeah. And I always encourage, people that are new in comms to, give some thought to what it is you want to do in comms too. Sort of all the way back to the very start of the conversation around, everybody should work in agency. Sure. Yes. I still believe that. Maybe you don't want to work in agency and that's fine. You'd say, I want to work in the food and beverage space, or I want to work in agriculture or whatever. Like, do a little bit of homework too. Map out some of these companies that you're interested in. Go see who's who on LinkedIn and, connect with a manager or a specialist and put your hand up, send some messages out. I've certainly done that over the course of my career. And then even on the agency side too, like there's a ton of agencies, not just in Toronto and the GTA, but all across Canada, all across North America. Go to those agency websites, learn about the work that they're doing, the sectors and specialties and service offerings that they have. Check out the job boards, follow them on LinkedIn. And maybe I'm stating some very obvious kind of prospect and job development kind of work that needs to be done, but the jobs are out there, the internships are out there, the co-op placements are out there. All the way back to your point now, like you do have to put the work in though, for sure, but there are jobs out there.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. No, I love that sentiment, and I totally agree. Listen, I want to respect your time and obviously really do appreciate the conversation. The last question that I wanted to kind of put out there is obviously you are now a young dad. You've got two very busy children. So I just wanted to kind of get your take on how that experience has changed, obviously, your life personally, but also professionally. And this is, I think, inherently an industry that is known for being, very intense. We've got fast deadlines. We have high visibility within the companies that we work for, high expectations. So how do you personally, find balance and really, I guess, protect your energy as a young father who probably is run ragged most of the times? What has that experience been like, and what do you recommend to other, young dads, young moms who are kind of going through it as well?
Yeah, no, great question. This may sound a little cliche, but I think being a parent has taught me to be way more patient than I've ever been. Your
Yep.
buttons get pushed all the time, even when you're supposed to be working. So that would be the big one. But I think I'll probably answer in a couple of different ways. As it relates to balance, I'm a big advocate that we all need to set our own boundaries. Um, at the same time, though, comms is inherently not a typical 9 to 5 job. Just it's not. It's a fact. But you need to set your own boundaries if you're the kind of person that wants to get up a little bit earlier in the day and bang out some work, or you've got kids obligations early evening. Like you need to kind of set those boundaries, set expectations. Talk to your teams, talk to your managers and your bosses about how to kind of manage time and still find a way to get your work done a little bit later. So balance is subjective for everyone. I'm very open. I do want to be able to pick my kids up from school. I like being able to go to soccer and baseball and parent teacher nights and all that kind of stuff. But I've missed those things too, because that's also the nature of comms. So protect your time, set your own boundaries, be open, be honest with your teams about how you also want to live your life personally. We are all human beings here at the end of the day, not just corporate workers, trying to get a job done or punch a card. I think the last piece I would say there is, being a parent too also just made me realize that like everybody's going through their own stuff. Like, I don't need to come in every day and tell my team, I was up at 3 a.m. and, my kid was sick and this and that, but that's also just something I have to deal with. So just reminding yourself that even though maybe somebody's putting on a smile, they could be dealing with a ton of stuff in the background. And that's not just kids, it's, personal health, parents, life, moving, maybe your spouse lost a job. Like, so just be a good human being. Also, that's
Yeah.
just kind of my mantra. I like hanging out with people that are good people. You're a great person, Eric. I think that's why we've got on for so many years. But um, you know, protect your time. Realize people just got a lot of stuff going on, and you'd be surprised how much more seamlessly things move through your life, personally and professionally, if you're open to that.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's that old adage, like everybody's fighting a battle that you know nothing about or that you can't see,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And kind of conducting yourself with that idea of like just being grateful, being appreciative, being supportive, being open and honest. I think that goes a long way. So
for sure.
Yeah, man. Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time to share some of your insights. Obviously, as I said, so we've both come a long way from where we were when we both met, I think in what was it, 2010, 2011, something like that. So I appreciate, who you are and the contributions that you've made to the industry. And again, thanks for taking the time to chat today. Really, really appreciate it.
Likewise, really appreciate you having me on. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks for listening to The Bottom Line with Erick Bauer. If you enjoyed the conversation, share it with someone who'd appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes are on the way, and you won't want to miss what's next.